Okay, welcome. Here is another series for you in our Inside Sales studio. We're calling it the Inside Sales Frontline Q&A, and today I want to do a follow-up Q&A session regarding a webinar that we did yesterday, in fact, called Fighting the Gravity. Really important. We even extended the time by a half hour, but it still wasn't enough. And so I want to make sure we give it the honor that it needs. My name is Jen Gergen. I'm Director of Operations for the aa-isp, but really I want you to meet Richard Harris. He is the host of our session yesterday, and I think is going to give us some good contents to move forward. So Richard, without further ado, I'd like to just kind of jump in. And one of the things that I want to say that we covered as far as fighting the gravity yesterday is, dealing with mental health and how to end the stigma. And so one of the things that you suggested was to be open about it. And we had guests from uncrush.org and people who are sharing their stories about their own struggles. And so I can even share that myself, I struggle with anxiety problems. I'm taking Lexapro to manage it. I do meditation and other things to keep it under control. And so here I am. I'm with you. We're all in this game together. So knowing that, here's my first question. So how do I know? How do I honor the difference, right, between being just sad and stressed about work and then really defining it as having depression and anxiety?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to first start off that I am not a health professional. I'm not a mental health professional. I am a health advocate and a patient. So the comments I make are based on my own personal experiences and just talking to friends and colleagues. If you feel like you do need help, please seek a professional. That's the first and most important thing if you're at that stage. So I just want to put that out there.
Great.
But I do want to sort of address a couple of things, right? Like you even sort of said it yourself, is that first you said, well, you're using Lexapro and meditation to keep it under control. And I want to just give you this advice. You don't even know about what I'm about to say, is that you're not trying to keep it under control, because that would imply that it controls you. You're just trying to live your day, right? Jen's just trying to be Jen. And you've recognized that this piece of you is just a piece of you. Just like you wouldn't try to control your happiness, you wouldn't stop yourself from being more happy. Yes, you want to try to feel better on certain days, but these little nuances, these little frames of references are a big step that it's to what I think is being able to just live, right? It's not about managing, it's not about controlling. It's just like, I just want to be
like brushing your teeth,
right? Yeah, exactly. Totally great example. So anyway, so that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing, coming back to this question, is I don't know that you it's hard to determine the difference between sadness and depression. My experience has been that my sadness was always there, like constantly there. The example I gave yesterday in the session was that there was always sort of like this tugging of a string inside my body. Like I was trying to walk down the street and someone was sort of holding my collar, not preventing me from walking, but just slowing me down. That was one way I recognized it. Another way I recognized it, I would be in conversations, and I still experience this sometimes. I could be talking to someone face to face, having a very nice conversation, but emotionally for me, I will actually feel like I'm watching myself have that conversation, and I'm standing outside a house watching it through a window, even though I'm live there and in the moment with that person. And that made me feel sad because I feel like I'm not connected. Those were triggers for me. I do want to say one thing. Sadness is good. Like if you're not sad sometimes, then it's hard to understand what happy is. So I want to make sure that people don't misinterpret this as, hey, you should never feel sad. It's life. You should feel sadness, happiness, joy, anger, frustration, jealousy, excitement. Like all of those emotions matter. And you want to, in my experience, you want to experience all of them. When any of them become overwhelming, for you, meaning that you can't shake it, then it might be worth saying, what's going on with me? Not like, oh my God, I need to go see somebody, but just, hey, what's going on with me? Let me try and take inventory of how I'm feeling over the last week or 2 weeks or month or 6 months. For me, when I first started, it was years. literally was like, I've felt this way for years.
Yeah.
And that felt normal. The oddest thing for me was, as I started to work through my sadness and my depression, it was scary to feel happy because I was so comfortable feeling sad, which is a really, it's interesting. Like, that's, for me, that's what my experience was like. So, um, again, I don't know how you define it from a clinical medical professional point of view, but that's what I noticed, and that's when I noticed I kind of needed to do something about it. But I also had to want to do something about it, right? And I think that I ignored it for years, like I think a lot of us do. And then I finally had to realize that I don't like this. Something's not the way I think it should be. So now I'm going to seek some help. So I'm going to pause there because I know we have a couple other topics, but
Yeah, no, I think
yeah.
that's good. I do think a good measure for people too when they're trying to define the differences, when in doubt, there is no doubt. So if you're feeling concerned that you do have this
Mm-hmm.
enduring issue, then talk to
Yep.
professionals who can help you define
Yep.
it. Either
Yep.
that's your doctor who will be able to prescribe, or a talk therapist who's going to be able to understand what
Yep.
information you guys need.
Help. And it could be that you go talk to someone and you just figure out that, oh, I'm just really sad. For example,
Yeah,
my
life's
mother-in-law
sometimes.
passed away. My mother-in-law passed away a year ago almost. And the family has been sad a little bit extra for the last year. That's kind of healthy and normal, if you ask me.
Sure.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It doesn't mean we, shy away from social activities or do those kinds of things, but we definitely sort of acknowledge it, but we talk about it. Our 9-year-old will just sit up in bed and say, I kind of miss grandma today. And we'll just talk about that. And we miss her too. And, it's healthy.
Yeah,
And I
reverence for
think there's,
your life and what's happening
yeah,
is,
yeah, it's like, I think that's the important piece, is you just sort of need to recognize it and talk about it, and sort of take a curiosity point of view. Hey, what's going on here? Like, not like a critical view, but like, hey, am I sad? Am I
right.
depressed? Right? So
Okay.
that would be my advice.
So then, yeah, like you say, I think this kind of takes us into the next thing. So let's say that, we have defined that we need help. We have determined that
Mm-hmm.
it's enduring. So now what?
Mm-hmm.
How do I start? How
Yeah.
do I ask for the help that I need?
So there's this, you know, my wife and I tend to be cluttery people. We have a little bit more clutter. And it's kind of like, well, where do I start to clean out this clutter in the house? And my wife found one of these little motivational plaques that we have in the house. And I love it for this too. And it says, start anywhere. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, just start. Like, just pick a stack of paper and just start deciding what you can throw away. Kind of the same thing. So for some people, for me, when I started, the first thing I did was I picked up the phone and called my mom, and then my mom gave me some suggestions. She said, go call a friend and have them go meet you for a beer tonight. Although that was before I sort of understood that alcohol is not the best way to handle depression, but it wasn't like we were going to get drunk. We were going to talk. Um, but that was my starting point. She then said, would you like to come home? And I said, no. Then she said, would you like me to call around and ask about someone we know in the Bay Area who's a professional? And I said, yes. So that's where I started. For other people, you could start with, maybe I just need to sit on the couch and think for 2 minutes about myself. Like, it doesn't, like, there's no like, oh my gosh, I now need to put something on my calendar and find time to talk to a therapist. I think you just start anywhere. So for some people, it's starting and just kind of going, okay, let me think about this, and then sleep on that, and then think about it some more. For others, it could be, I need to call a therapist. For some, and I've had friends where they're like, oh my God, I need to go to rehab, right? Like, they've had a drug or alcohol problem. For others, it's, I'm going to download an app and start meditating. Start anywhere is the most important thing. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't mean you have to start taking meds and going to see a doctor. And I encourage those things. I love those things, but maybe you need to call your clergy, right? Whether it's a rabbi, a priest, an imam, whatever it is that supports your belief system. Maybe you just call a friend. Just start. That's the best place for me to tell people to go.
That's good. All right. Well, so that kind of leads into this next thing. So what can you clarify in a little bit more detail about some helpful hints that we can we can do. So you've mentioned the clergy, things like that. What are some other,
Hmm.
you mentioned apps even. Can you dive in a little more?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Headspace. I've been doing Headspace for just hit a 1 year anniversary with them. You can do it in little increments, which is what I love, meaning anywhere from 3 to 5 to 10 minutes.
What is Headspace?
Most
I'm not sure.
Headspace, so yeah, fair point. It's so second nature to me. Headspace is a meditation app, and it teaches you not only how to meditate, but the value of meditation. And it will teach you, particularly in the beginning, it'll teach you things like just sitting there for 10 minutes or 5 minutes. It's sometimes it's kind of uncomfortable because you're not used to creating space for your mind. And in the beginning, your mind is still, at least for me, I should say, your mind might continue to just sort of keep racing, even though you're trying to meditate. And that's okay. That's normal. You're learning a new skill. And over time, you learn to sort of understand the difference between sitting in silence and thinking about thinking, you know, and how to let go of that thought. I think the best way I can describe it is that oftentimes a thought will go in my head and it's like being inside a pinball machine, right? The ball bounces from one side to the other and my mind keeps thinking about that. And then it starts thinking about thinking. And the way I've discovered ways to let it go is that, and a different way to look at it is like, hey, let a thought come in my right ear, recognize it as a thought in my brain, and then it exits my head in the left ear, right? So that I can let that thought go and not let it bounce around so much. And that's the best way to describe how I've experienced meditation. In the last year, I've done almost 3,000 minutes of meditation. My average session, like it tracks all this for you, my average session is maybe 9 minutes a day, but sometimes I only do 3 minutes. Sometimes my meditation, and they have this in there, is like a 10-minute meditation to help you go to sleep or to go back to sleep for 5 minutes, right? Like that can be a meditation. Like it's just bringing this level of mindfulness to you that I had a hard time accomplishing. So that is what Headspace is. Um,
Okay.
and I think it's been great for me. Some people like Calm. I think there's some other ones out there. I personally struggle with food and eating and sweet tooths and cravings and stuff like that, which is also can lead to some of my sadness and anxiety and depression.
Oh yeah,
You
medicating
know,
with food or
you know.
drugs is huge
Oh,
for
absolutely.
a lot of people.
It's like I'm sad because I eat, and I eat because I'm sad, right?
Yeah.
It's a habit thing. And there's a fantastic app I just discovered literally last week, called Eating Right Now, and it's a 28-day on app video program that teaches you how to more mindfully eat and be aware of the food and not beat yourself up. And it gives you all these practices, and it involves a certain level of meditation and mindfulness around it, which helps change your relationship with food. So for me, that app has been really helpful. And I think I just told my wife today, I've been 10 days and I lost 5 pounds. And, I
Right.
know a lot of guys don't talk about that stuff, but why not?
Hey, we're
Like
all out here. This
we're all out there
is great.
working on it, right? So these are the things that I think you can do. So those are some of the tips you can do.
Okay.
Um, Other simple things, weighted blankets have been fantastic. Like they just make you feel more comfortable at night, and they make you feel snuggled up against and held, and sort of helps that inner child in you feel more comfortable. That's been great.
Yeah, I've heard that's
Um,
really successful for a lot of people.
yeah, we did a panel with aa-isp in Dallas, and this young woman was on there, and she talked about her challenges, and she loves those adult coloring books that get really intricate because it forces her to really color and pay attention by staying in the lines. And it's not that you want to live life staying in the lines, but by focusing so hard while you're coloring, it allows your mind
Yeah,
to
just empty it.
not focus, which is meditation. Like
Right.
that's the value. It's a different type of meditation for her. So I think those things are cool. There's been a study on the game Tetris. Go Google Tetris. And I know Chris, who was on our show yesterday, he has found that that's been really helpful for him has to do with spatial recognition, and again, sort of numbing the mind in a way that it frees the mind, not numbing the mind so that you don't
No,
accomplish
just
it.
emptying it. Yeah, just so that
Yeah, just sort of,
give
yeah,
you something to focus on, so you're not swirling
totally.
in your.
So you're not overwhelmed by stuff. Totally. I think those are things. I do think you should go talk to people. I do think you should seek medical advice. I'm a firm believer in medication. I'm a firm believer in acupuncture if you feel like that's what works for you. There's no single recipe for this.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to sort of figure out a dash of this, a dose of that, a splash of this, right?
Yeah, one of my, my big pet peeves right now in mental care and self-care and the
mhm,
idea of these kind of the memes that show up on social media about, walking through the forest is paramount to this handful of pills that you see in somebody's hand. And it's like, do this,
mhm,
not this. It's like, how about both? Can we have both?
right.
I believe in both.
Yep. I'm a handful guy. Like, believe me, I take way more than Lexapro. I take bupropion, I take Lexapro, I take one more that just got added about a year ago. So I'm a big believer. If you're going to go down the medication route, my only advice is it's going to take some time. You're going to have to find the right ones for you. Work with a medical professional. Work with someone who's done this a lot. Um, be sure you do explore the side effects so that you know what to recognize,
Yeah.
and just again, be conscious about it. But again, even if you go and try medication and it doesn't work, that's still good because now you can move one step closer to what might work. It's not like, oh my God, that
Yeah,
didn't work. It's
ruling it
more like,
out is valuable.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. It's just like sales, right? Sometimes you got to disqualify the lead so that you can focus on the right one.
Way to bring it on point. I love it.
There you go. Yeah.
Yesterday, what was great too is, Tim had with uncrush.org, he mentioned genetic testing even about how.
I'd never heard of that. That was
No, I had
fascinating to me. I'm actually, I need to follow up with him on that because that was fascinating to me. Because they do say that there is some family history of, whether it's alcoholism or depression or, it kind of makes sense. And I'd never thought about it.
well, just that it's
So
interesting
that
that
was
you're
interesting.
able to test things before you're
Hmm.
even going down a path so that it helps, guide
I
your healthcare professional to know where to start. Like, if
totally,
you're not a person who's going to be receptive to Prozac, let's not even go there. Let's try
let's
out.
not go there. Yeah, totally. Totally.
Wow,
Yep.
yeah. Very, very good. And we could go through lots more hints. Obviously,
Yeah,
exercise myself, like that's a huge one
absolutely.
because
Yep.
mine is more of an anxiety issue than a depression issue. And so it's like giving me
Hmm.
somewhere to put all that kind of nervous energy that I'm swirling in. Oh
To
my gosh.
work.
Any
Yeah. In
other
a fun way. Yeah.
could throw in that we haven't covered? I mean, there's so many, I know.
I'm sure there's so many. And I'm sure I'm leaving out a couple, but I think for
Well,
the
then
purpose
let
of
me
this
ask you.
conversation, it's a good start,
I want to ask more specifically too, like, so we've defined that we have a problem. Now we're trying to get the help. Here's all the stuff that we're doing, bringing it to the work topic. So
Hmm.
I've been open and honest and asked for the PTO I need, or I'm going to these
Hmm.
healthcare professionals and letting my office team know. I mean, just part of it is like we said in the meeting yesterday that, we got to end the stigma and kind of get our people involved. And so
Yeah.
now people are aware. Ugh,
Hmm.
it's heavy and hard. And now they want to
Hmm.
be a part of it and ask questions, particularly if you have had to go to like rehab or something that's really
Hmm.
tangible for people. Now you're back at work and they're asking you questions. How are you? Blah, blah, blah. What's
Right.
scripting you could provide for how we can handle bringing this part of our life to work?
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. We mentioned it yesterday. And I think that, you know, scripting and role playing, just like in sales, it's the same thing in life, right? There are moments like, imagine if I'm going to go ask my wife to marry me, or before she was my wife, I probably scripted it out in my head. I actually had a whole plan of how I was going to do it. If you think about teenagers today in the promposal,
Oh, God.
right? They're practicing, they're role playing, they're figuring it out either with their family or probably their friends more than their mom and dad. So it's the same thing in this situation. You know, being able to go to my wife and say, and I do this with business deals. Hey, honey, here's something that's going on. Here's what I feel like I want to say, but I can't say that because, if you know Richard, I get to be snarky. She's like, honey, you can't say that. um, so I role play those things, and it's the same thing. Well, okay, well, I just came back from rehab, or I just came back from my, 2-week vacation where I went to spend time on mental health, and people say, "How are you?" Well, sometimes they're just saying, how are you casually? Like,
Yeah.
I'm good, thanks. Like it doesn't mean, sometimes it means, how are you? And sometimes it just means, hey, how you doing?
Right.
But being prepared with some answers. And I do mean literally writing down, how are you? And give yourself 2 or 3 responses, right? Um, and again, you may have different responses for different people, right? You may say a certain thing to your boss, but you may say something else to, I call it your work BFF, right? Whoever that person is, you may have a more intimate conversation with. Well, write it down, right? I do think that the one piece of advice, because, and I hate to say I want to let the stigma control us, but there is value to thinking through the right answers, role playing them out loud with a friend or a spouse, but also keep in mind that sometimes less is more, right? If someone says, "Oh, I understand you did this. How'd it go?" Sometimes you just say, "Thanks for asking. It went well.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate the support." Like, just just answer the question, and decide if you want to go into a long diatribe, right? That's up to you. That's your story to tell. It's not my story to tell you how to tell it. But in some cases, more is better, and in some cases, less is more, and that's okay. You need to figure out what your story is and how you want to share it, and even if you want to share it. It's totally appropriate to say, "Hey, thank you. I appreciate you asking. If you don't mind, I'm just going to keep that to myself for right now, but I am appreciative of you asking." And maybe
Yeah.
that's the right answer, right? And that way,
Yeah. I think the limited is important for some of
yeah.
us to hear.
For some, yeah. Look,
For me,
there are
like
plenty of people.
I have
Sorry.
trust issues with the idea that
Hmm.
somebody has interest in my well-being who isn't very close to me, so it's like being able to honor their interest.
Hmm.
They're maybe it's feigned, I don't know. But giving my
No,
the freedom to say, man, yeah, awesome, love that you asked, not going to
but
talk.
yeah, but I think it's not a vanity thing, although it might feel that way, and maybe that's part of the stigma. Um, but it's about, well, what makes Jen comfortable in this situation, right? Which is really what this entire discussion of being mentally healthy is about, is like me redefining my happiness about who I am. Part of that definition is who I'm going to share it with, how much I want to share it, and what I feel like sharing, you know? So I don't think you're being vain at all. And I think in big organizations, the politics that can be involved is that, I agree. Like, if is someone going to try and use that against me in a career move? Well, that's a normal thought to have, to be honest with you, right? And at some
Yeah,
point, you have to kind of make the decision of, either F you if you do that to me, F you to the company if you allow that to happen to me,
yeah.
or F you, I don't care. I think, which is a little bit more my style.
Yeah,
So I'm like,
you and I
hold it against me, don't hold it against me. That's one thing. So,
well, we
oh, I
could,
do.
like yesterday, we could go on and on,
Yeah,
and there's really never a point where this conversation ends. And so I think
no,
to leave people, I would say, hopefully, this is giving you nothing of value beyond just think about it. Just start
yeah,
thinking about it. Be willing to look at it. Be willing to talk about it.
yeah,
Richard and I are here, open and putting ourselves out on the table for you, sharing our
yep.
deepest, darkest places. So
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. I had a call yesterday after the session with a gentleman whose son is 17 and going through things, and he's just like, "Well, Richard, what do I do?" And I said, "Look, I don't know. My kids are much smaller than that. I can tell you what it's like to be a 17-year-old kid who has a father who was disconnected from this emotional stuff. That was me. But I don't know how to tell you to parent it. But we had a really great conversation, and I think I was able to give him some just things to think about, which is all I ever really want to do. Is I can't tell you what to do, but I can give you things to think about, and I'm happy to share that stuff.
well, on the screen, I've got your contact information. Hopefully,
Yeah,
people feel welcome
please.
to reach out and to continue the conversation with us. I'm going to go to this slide too so you can see our website. This is going to be a replay there, but also yesterday's webinar that we mentioned, Fighting the Gravity. We've talked about that a
Yep.
couple times. That was an hour session, so a lot more in there and some great advice from Christopher and Tim, our guests. So, man, thanks so much for meeting with me again, Richard. I appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, Jen. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for supporting the discussion,
No, absolutely.
right? Like that's super important. And thanks to Larry and Bob over at aa-isp for recognizing that it's something to discuss. And by all means, this is not sales related. And while this is the aa-isp, this goes way bigger than sales. So we appreciate anything to do to sort of just get some word out there. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. All right, till next time.
All right.
Bye.